His target town is the historic centre of the food processing industry as inflation finally returns to the Bank of England's target. Here they say the statistics and the slab tell the same story.
In terms of fish, prices have actually dropped over the last couple of years. We had the container crisis after COVID when stuff that we import from the Far East went through the roof. And then that's come back to normal, if not below what it was pre-COVID. And fresh prices have stayed steady.
Falling food inflation is welcome for the hospitality trade, battered by COVID and cost pressures on businesses and their customers that the boss of one of Britain's biggest pub chains told me will linger.
Energy cost, food cost, drink cost, labour cost. These are all costs that have been volatile over the last couple of years, and inflation doesn't go up or come down in straight lines either. So we're seeing some areas come down, which is encouraging. But the impact of the last 2 to 3 years is that the cost base of running a small business is significantly higher.
Predictably on the campaign trail, the Chancellor toasted success, while the woman who wants to replace him said consumers are still drowning their sorrows.
Having inherited inflation that was higher than nearly any other major economy, it is now lower, and that means the difficult decisions we've taken have paid off.
I don't think the economy has turned a corner. Many people are still really struggling because although inflation is back at target and that is welcome, of course it doesn't mean that any of those price rises have been undone.
On the front in Cleethorpes, the political debate is less important than the pound in people's pockets.
£3.60.
There you go. Where do you start with that one?
Inflation's coming down. We're supposed to be feeling like we turned the corner. Is that how it feels?
Is it really? No.
No?
Not at all.
Cost of living still rising?
Inflation is rising.
They need to put wages up. We're all support workers and our economy is disgraceful, what we get paid.
Disgraceful.
Are you feeling things getting any easier?
Not really, no. Not at all. Everything's still as expensive as it is. If it goes down in the next 3 or 4 months, I'll retract that statement and I'll say fair enough, I was wrong. But I don't think it will.
Falling inflation is good news, but it will take time before households feel the benefit of this change in the economic weather. Underlying services inflation is still quite high, which means the Bank of England's unlikely to cut interest rates until September. And prices of clothes, of food, of rents are all still 20% higher than they were 3 years ago. If this is the turning of the economic tide, it may have come too late to change the course of the election. Paul Kelso, Sky News in Grimsby and Cleethorpes.
Well, the latest poll for Sky News by YouGov is projecting that Labour would have the second largest majority since World War II. It also delivers some surprising results for the Lib Dems and for Reform. Our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, has the details at the screen.
The second of 3 huge polling projections. Records are going to be broken if this projection turns out to be right. Let's look at the headline. A Labour majority of 200 seats. The biggest majority since the Second World War, bigger than Tony Blair in 1997. Let's look at the House of Commons that would result in that majority. And here we have a commanding number of Labour MPs, 425, record-breaking for Keir Starmer. Look at this, another record in the other direction for Rishi Sunak, down to 108. The SNP over there, well, they go down 28 seats to 20 compared to 2019. John Swinney there. The Greens would double their representation, taking a seat off a Labour shadow cabinet member, interesting, in Bristol, Thangam Debonair. Now look at a couple of the biggest winners in this polling projection. So Edward Davey, they got 11 seats in 2019. They're on 67, a huge result for his team. And Nigel Farage, he has shaken up this race by becoming leader of Reform. He's on 5 seats. That party didn't exist at the last election. So let's have a look at what's changed in the campaign. In the last 2.5 weeks, you can see the Tories tanking, Labour staying the same, Liberal Democrats, probably the biggest winners, Reform going from 0 to 5. That is what this campaign has done, not good for the Tories. So look at this. These are the big winners. And this man, possibly the biggest winner of all. He is standing not only as Reform leader, but also to be elected in the Essex seat of Clacton. And he looks like he's going to win. Not just win, knock it out of the park. Reform on 45%, Tories on 25%. Now, if this man comes in order to represent Reform UK, he's going to leave. Look at all these people. Here are 15 of the 27 members of the current cabinet who are standing in the next election, these are the ones that are projected to lose. And as you sweep across, you can see Jeremy Hunt and Penny Mordaunt and Johnny Mercer, all of them are projected to lose. So you can see there the scale of the change that we're heading towards. So let's look at what the political map might look like. This is Boris Johnson's Britain from 2019. Look at all the blue. Now look at this. This is what YouGov projects the political map is going to look like. So much less blue, huge amounts of red. The red wall almost back. Yellow, Liberal Democrats down in the southwest. That is a huge redrawing of the way our politics works if July the 4th turns out anything like that map.
Sam Coates there. Well, if that poll is right, in just over 2 weeks' time, it could be a catastrophic night for the Conservatives, who it seems have been on the back foot since the election was called. And tonight it's been revealed that one of the Prime Minister's close protection officers has been arrested over alleged bets on the election date. Well, our chief political correspondent, John Craig, joins me now from Downing Street. An investigation and an arrest then. John, tell us more.
Well, Sky News understands that the officer who was arrested is indeed an officer working as part of the PM's close protection team. We also understand that several bets were made, at least one of them in 3 figures. Now, you may recall that a week or so ago we learned that Craig Williams, who was an MP and is now a candidate, was Rishi Sunak's parliamentary private secretary. He also, it was revealed, placed a bet, £100 bet, it's understood, on the date of the general election, July the 4th, shortly before the announcement, the shock announcement by Rishi Sunak. That was on the 22nd of May. Now a police officer is also being investigated. Now, in their official statement, the Met said that it was on last Friday, the 14th of June, that they were contacted by the Gambling Commission. They said, they told the police they were investigating alleged bets, plural, made by a police constable from the Met's Royalty and Specialist Protection Command, and they were related to the timing of the general election. Now, that matter was then referred to the Met's Directorate of Professional Standards. They opened an investigation and the officer was removed from operational duties. Then on Monday this week, the 17th of June, the officer was subsequently arrested, the Met said, on suspicion of an offence, a misconduct in public office. He was taken into custody and then bailed pending further inquiries. And the matter was referred to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. Well, tonight, the Liberal Democrats have called for an inquiry by the Cabinet Office. Their Deputy Leader, Daisy Cooper, said this is shaping up to be yet another scandal at the heart of government. This stinks of yet more sleaze and answers are needed, she said.
John Craig in Downing Street, thank you. The SNP leader John Swinney has launched his party's manifesto today, putting Scottish independence at the forefront. Many of the other pledges were geared towards a more devolved Scotland, also announcing they would strive to rejoin the European Union. Sky's political correspondent Tamara Cohen has more.
John Swinney. He's only been First Minister for 6 weeks, but John Swinney must take Scotland's Party of Independence into the fight of its life.
The UK is going in a different direction. It's going in the wrong direction. Far too often, the interests of Scotland are ignored altogether.
He's calling for a massive cash injection into the NHS in what he calls the most left-wing manifesto. But is the prospect of independence fading away?
Well, as expected, the manifesto has independence, page 1, line 1. But with the SNP poised to lose seats to Labour, their signature policy separating from the rest of the UK is looking harder to deliver.
The First Minister said if they win over half the seats in Scotland, 29, it's game on for another referendum.
So you could lose nearly 20 seats and that would still be a mandate for independence. To a lot of people, that will sound ludicrous.
Well, what I'm saying is that if we win a majority of seats, that empowers the Scottish Government to take forward negotiations with the United Kingdom Government about how we become independent. But that will only come about if the SNP does well.
But if you don't do well, if you win fewer seats than Labour, then it's off the agenda for now.
Well, what I want to make sure is that people are attracted to vote for the Scottish National Party in this election, and that's the proposition we put to them in this election.
and who'd pay for more NHS spending.
So suggesting that this entire cash injection would be funded by higher taxes.
Well, I think that's the rational way for this to be addressed, because we've got to invest in our public services.
Scotland is still split down the middle on being independent. Edinburgh East and Musselburgh is SNP held, but among the beachgoers were switchers from all sides.
I used to be more inclined like SNP, but after COVID, it kind of changed my mind about it, because I don't really think right now is the time for independence.
Well, Conservatives have made much a mess of the government, and SNP have had 3 leaders in the last 2 years, so they don't seem to be any better. So let's give somebody else a try.
Lack of personal integrity, I think, within the Conservative Party. And admire Starmer as an individual, and he's not too left-wing, and he's had a proper job.
But some sticking with the SNP.
Not voting for independence, but I'm voting for Scotland.
The Prime Minister, visiting a power station, said the SNP had the wrong priorities.
A vote for anyone who's not a Conservative candidate at this election is just a vote for higher taxes.
Hello. Keir Starmer at a supermarket in Wiltshire, pushing the case for change.
Well, look, there's not much difference between the SNP and the Tories. They're both running on unelected leaders. They've both got a dismal record in office.
With the polls looking bleak for the Nationalists and their record under scrutiny, this election likely to leave them with little to celebrate. Tamara Cohen, Sky News, Edinburgh.
The jury in the trial of Constance Martin and her partner Mark Gordon has been discharged after they failed to reach verdicts. Both deny being involved in the death of their baby daughter Victoria, who was found in Brighton last year. Sky's Ashna Hurinag reports on what happened in court.
After 70 hours and 33 minutes behind closed doors, the jury in the trial of Constance Martin and Mark Gordon has been dismissed. The jury foreman told Court 1 of the Old Bailey that the 5 men and 5 women were unable to reach verdicts. Martin, now 37, and 50-year-old Gordon denied all of the charges against them, including concealing the birth of a child, child cruelty, perverting the course of justice, causing or allowing the death of a child, and manslaughter by gross negligence. Victoria was their 5th child. Her body was found in March last year in a disused shed. The discovery followed an intense nationwide hunt for the couple. Constance Martin smiled at the 10 jurors and mouthed the words "thank you." The judge in this case, Mark Lucraft KC, thanked them for their dedicated public service and excused them from jury service for the rest of their lives. The trial began in January and was originally listed for 6 weeks. Instead, it lasted more than 4.5 months, with the defendants being driven in each day. Prosecutors now have a week to decide whether to proceed with a retrial. Ashna Hurinag, Sky News at the Old Bailey.
882 migrants crossed the Channel yesterday, the highest in more than 18 months. It brings the total so far this year to more than 12,300. Adding on previous years and zooming in reveals small boat crossings are at the highest level on record for this point in the year and 18% up on last year. Well, the number of people per boat is steadily increasing too, to over 50 people per boat as smugglers change their tactics, making the crossings more dangerous. Well, in Germany, authorities have boosted deportations in the face of rocketing migration. Now some migrants say they're heading to the UK instead. Our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins has this report.
Ahmed is on the move. He's heading to the UK. He's running from Germany. Asylum application rejected. A deportation flight like this to Iraq was on the cards. So instead, he fled to France.
I want to go to the UK because I'm afraid of deportation in Germany. Already they try to deport me, and that's why I left.
Ahmed's one of a number of Iraqi Kurds Sky's met recently who've paid smugglers to get to the UK after Germany toughened up its deportation rules. His first attempt to cross failed. French police caught them trying to pick up more passengers and popped their dinghy. When we speak to him, he's about to try again.
I'm not afraid about Rwanda. If the deportation doesn't stop in Germany, all the refugees in Germany will cross the border to the UK.
Asylum applications in Germany rocketed to their highest rate since 2016 last year. So the government announced tougher migration laws, speeding up deportations, giving police more search powers. Outside the Iraqi embassy in Berlin, this group say they're already feeling the effects. Deportations have risen by a third so far this year.
Some of my friends have been deported. The police raided the house at 2 or 3 in the morning, Goran tells me. I'm scared and can't sleep in my own home.
Do you think people will stay and risk being sent home, or do you think they'll run to another country like France or the UK?
For sure, the smuggling will increase. People who feel their lives are potentially threatened back in Iraq will try any way possible to reach another country, he says.
The government says the deportations are in line with international law.
Hello.
Yeah, hello.
For Hammer, it's too late. Missing the paperwork needed to stay, he was deported to Iraq with this group at the end of April. He's in hiding when we call, so we've concealed his identity.
We were 25 immigrants and 90 policies with us.
How did you feel when you were flying back?
Of course, very bad. It's not safe. I cannot easily go to the outside.
He's now indefinitely separated from his wife, Shada, who was given asylum as an Iranian. She's devastated.
Germany says that it needs to control immigration and that there are too many people coming here.
I accept what you're saying, but Germany does not know how to do it fairly.
Shada shows me the pictures of her German wedding. It could be years before the man she loves is allowed to return. Germany's open door period is a distant memory. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Germany.
The Russian President Vladimir Putin has arrived in Hanoi in Vietnam tonight for talks with the country's leaders. Earlier, he was given star treatment by North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un. Kim said the two countries had a fiery friendship and they agreed what was called a peaceful military pact, which included a mutual defence clause in the case of aggression against either country. Spanish police are searching for a British teenager who's missing in Tenerife. 19-year-old Jay Slater was last heard from on Monday when he phoned a friend to tell them he was lost in a mountainous area without water and his phone battery was low. Earlier, Sky News spoke to Jay's friend who reported him missing.
He would never have his mum worrying like this. He would never have his family worrying like this. He would never have us worrying like this. Like, if he saw someone, the first thing he would do is say, I need to ring my mum. Like, I know that for a fact. Well, I've never, ever in my life been so worried at all.
Alarming, outrageous, disgraceful. All the leaders of the political parties expressed their anger today after protests covered Stonehenge in orange paint. The activists from Just Stop Oil who were arrested said the UK government needed to agree a plan to end the extraction and burning of oil and gas. Sky's West of England correspondent Dan Whitehead reports from Wiltshire.
Amid an orange plume, Stonehenge became the latest victim of Just Stop Oil. An onlooker tries to tackle one of the protesters as paint is sprayed over 3 of the megaliths. Police made 2 arrests just after 12 noon. The campaigners saying they took action to highlight the damage of fossil fuels.
I think if people stop and think about this for a minute and they consider that literally some custard powder has been thrown at some stones, important stones, of course, and that this action has been taken to preserve civilization, then, you know, the balance, I think people will actually sympathise and empathise.
English Heritage, which looks after the historic site, described the attack as extremely upsetting. Some of the thousands of visitors today feeling the same way.
I think it's terrible. This is, heritage. This is something that is beautiful. Why would you do that? I don't understand it.
It's just the wrong way to go about it. It doesn't make me attuned to their message. I'm not looking at their message and going, wow, that's really having an impact on me. It's doing the opposite.
Just Stop Oil say that this is powdered paint and it should just come off in the rain, but the fact is it's been widely condemned, and English Heritage say they're sending specialists to now assess the level of damage. Political leaders on the campaign trail, including Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer, condemning the action, but some visitors did find a silver or orange lining.
Of course it's horrible, but you know, you can actually, the orange makes it easy to read the old graffiti that was carved in 100 years ago.
I think it's quite unique, absolutely, because now I can say I've been to the orange Stonehenge, and anybody else, I've seen the two of them, and they won't know whether I'm telling lies or not.
The vandalism comes a day before an expected 10,000 will descend on Stonehenge for the summer solstice. Sunrise here may now come with an extra orange glow. Dan Whitehead, Sky News at Stonehenge in Wiltshire.
Microsoft has been dramatically toppled as the world's most valuable public company. Nvidia, which had only overtaken Apple for the #2 spot earlier this month, is now worth $3.326 trillion. Sky's science and technology editor Tom Clark has been looking at what boosted the company above some of the biggest tech brands in the world.
Everybody is so nice in Taiwan. You may have never heard of Jensen Huang, but he's now the boss of the world's most valuable company, chipmaker Nvidia. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg recently called him the Taylor Swift of tech. Huang now has the rock star status to go with his trademark leather jackets. The secret of Nvidia's success? They make the chips, specifically the ultra-fast graphic processing units that are driving the AI revolution.
Your future PC will become an AI. It'll be constantly helping you, assisting you in the background.
For a long time, Nvidia was only really a name in the gaming industry, their graphics chips powering consoles and games PCs. Chips made by rivals like Intel and AMD, dominating the data centers and cloud computing infrastructure on which the online world runs. But at least a decade ago, Nvidia realized its chips were ideal for training language and image models in the growing field of AI. In the last 18 months, as AI development went exponential, so did demand for Nvidia's chips and its market value. But, say analysts, it was no accidental success.
As it turns out, the math that is required to do things like graphics rendering is very, very similar and applicable to the same kind of math that's used to do machine learning and artificial intelligence. And putting all this in place over many, many, many years, finally building up to where we are today. But that's why they are where they are today. They've had this sort of like roadmap or runway for literally for decades.
But perhaps even Jensen Huang might not have predicted just how fast demand for AI would take off, leaving his rivals, and in fact the rest of the world's corporations, for dust.
It's only the 12th company to be #1 in the S&P 500. We've seen Apple and Microsoft vying for that position over the last decade. And I think it's ExxonMobil that were, in 2011, that was the #1. So the markets have changed.
Where fossil fuel firms were once the world's richest, the carbon age has now given way to silicon. Nvidia, the latest tech firm to rewrite financial history.
I am a digital human brand ambassador.
This time with the help of AI. Tom Clark, Sky News.
Now, after a disappointing start, Scotland is keeping its hopes alive at Euro 2024 with a draw against Switzerland. Let's go straight to our sports correspondent, Rob Harris, who's in Cologne. Rob.
Yes, Scotland fans leaving the stadium here in Cologne, just trying to digest what a 1-1 draw with Switzerland means. What it seems to give them hope of is potentially still qualifying for the next phase, but it could all come down to the maths and whom could be best third placed amongst all the teams here at the Euros. What we do know today here is that the host Germany have already gone through the first team into the knockout phase, and now Scotland will still be hoping of dreaming of joining them.
In more than 7 centuries, Cologne Cathedral has probably never seen a congregation like this before, the Tartan Army. And despite a humiliating start to the Euros, fans have kept the faith. But needing any help. A night when Scotland had to regain their rhythm against Switzerland. And there would be a reaction to the drubbing by Germany, taking just 13 minutes to score. It's back to McTominay, and it's deflected in! Scott McTominay's shot helped in by Switzerland's Fabian Schär. But a defensive lapse proved costly, with Xherdan Shaqiri pouncing with a thunderous strike to equalise. But Scotland could rely on Angus Gunn. Fine reaction saves, ensuring it was level at half-time. It was Gunn to the rescue again, touching a shot wide. And then, only the post preventing Scotland regaining the lead. But drawing 1-1 secured a point that could still prove valuable, all while restoring some pride and positivity. It leaves them still able to qualify for the knockout phase for the first time. They'll have to beat Hungary on Sunday when Group A concludes, just to have a chance. Unlike Scotland, England did make a winning start to their group against Serbia. But that didn't spare them from criticism. And Gareth Southgate is trying to shield his players from it, as he prepares to stick with the same side against Denmark.
We know that we have good players. We know that we can play better than we did the other day. But I thought the players, in what is an incredibly pressurised moment, started the game exceptionally well and defended brilliantly throughout the whole game. Physically, we'll be better for having a lot of the players having had a game. And emotionally, yeah, there's so much tension. I don't think people can really understand what it is like for young players.
And they can do what no Englishmen have done before, open a Euros with 2 wins.
So, as you said, the prospect of England tomorrow, Rob, what more can you tell us?
Well, they're in Frankfurt now, preparing for that match, trying to replicate what they did 3 years ago at the Euros by beating Denmark. Then it was in the semi-finals to reach the final. Now it's about securing that passage through to the last 16. And you get a sense from Gareth Southgate that he's a bit bemused by all the questions around the team and some of the scrutiny over his tactics when they've done what others haven't, win their first game to give them the 2-point cushion already at the top of their group. There will be a focus on the England fans in Frankfurt because there are many concerns about particularly some of the World War II related chants that we heard them being part of in Gelsenkirchen around their first game against Serbia. But no reports of any issues with them in Frankfurt. Here in Cologne, Scotland fans going off into the night knowing that their players feel a lot more confident having secured this 1-1 draw with Switzerland, still believing that their journey in Germany can continue.
Rob, live there in Cologne. Thank you. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview tonight, joined by Kev Maguire, Associate Editor of the Daily Mirror, and Annabel Denham, Deputy Comment Editor of the Telegraph. And among the stories we will be discussing, this on the front of the Telegraph with a very simple headline and stock maps as well. Oh, it's the FT, in fact, actually. Apologies. It's Sunak claiming credit for inflation. Show you the Telegraph as well, of course. Back in a moment. Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, our top stories. Rishi Sunak has welcomed inflation falling back to 2%, but a new poll suggests the Tories could be left with the lowest number of seats ever after the election. Just Stop Oil activists have sprayed orange paint on Stonehenge just days before the summer solstice. And Scotland have kept their hopes alive by drawing 1-1 tonight in the European Championships against Switzerland. Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with Kevin Maguire, Associate Editor of the Daily Mirror, and Annabel Denham, Deputy Comment Editor at The Telegraph. Welcome to both of you. So, to the front pages then. Grim reading has to be said for Downing Street tonight. A terrible prediction for the Conservatives on the front of The Telegraph. Tory wipeout is the headline. Their exclusive poll suggesting the Tories will be left with just 53 seats. A different poll, similar story on the front page of The Eye. Tories despair as poll signals their worst defeat in 200 years. That's a YouGov poll carried out with Sky News. And from The Times as well, the same. Tories set to suffer the worst poll defeat for 100 years. On the Financial Times, some better news for the PM. Sunak claims the credit as inflation hits the Bank of England's target for the first time in 3 years. The Guardian focusing on Labour and the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves's pledge to close the gender pay gap once and for all if her party wins the election. Elsewhere, the Metro leads on the murder of Leah Croucher, who's believed to have died defending herself against a sex offender. And the Mirror looking ahead to England's next game at the Euros. Their headline, Kane the Danes. Kevin will explain this all soon. A reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. So let's discuss this all with Kevin and Annabel, as I said. Look away now, Downing Street. Let's do the YouGov Sky News poll, first of all, which is the lead story for both The Eye and, in fact, The Times as well. Tories despair as poll signals the worst defeat in 200 years, back to the formation of the Conservative Party.
These are just phenomenal numbers. And they've been here now for weeks, and I keep thinking the polls are going to change, and they haven't. And so you can get these figures of massive Labour majorities, massive, getting 425 seats, the Tories down on 108, and it's just, I mean, it's a political earthquake, and it's happening because there is this big rupture, fracture on the right of British politics between the Conservative Party and Reform UK. Reform UK, Nigel Farage's mob taking most of their votes from the Conservative Party. And it's a gift to Keir Starmer and Labour, who could win less than the 40% share of the vote Jeremy Corbyn gotten lost in 2017, and have an absolute landslide under the first past the post system. And of course, the implications are Starmer will be able to do whatever he likes, or they'll have to manage a huge, probably unwieldy party with people who will never be able to give jobs, and do they, after a few months as MPs, become disillusioned? And then you'll have a Conservative Party that is just going to be absolutely smashed. Is it taken over by Farage? Is it replaced by Reform UK? Or does it somehow regroup in whatever way? But this is, we're living through history. We are living through political history, which will be studied in 100 years' time.
And a big boost for the Liberal Democrats in that YouGov poll as well, up to 67. And Reform on 5, despite the share of the vote they might get being predicted to be higher or projected to be higher. The problem for them, of course, is their vote is spread too thin.
Exactly. I mean, this is the nature of the political system that we have in the UK at the moment. Unfortunately, you might argue people may not feel after this next general election that they are being adequately represented at a parliamentary level, but nonetheless, that's the situation that we find ourselves in. As Kevin says, there is a sense that we're living through a historical moment now. This looks like Armageddon for the Conservative Party, an extinction level event, and they find themselves in a position where it's not beyond the realm of possibility that they will not be the official opposition after the general election, that will go to the Liberal Democrats. And what will that mean for, Kevin talked about a supermajority, what would it mean for our democracy to have such a left-wing parliament in a country that is, broadly speaking, I would say, centrist?
Stop smiling.
He cannot conceal his glee.
Wonderful.
She's seen
He's had 14 years in the doldrums, let's be fair. Yeah, so two numbers to remember. One, the 80-seat majority Boris Johnson won in 2019, and this YouGov poll putting the Tories at 108. You ain't seen nothing. Let's show you the Daily Telegraph. Tory wipeout. First of all, the change in colour. 2019 on the left of your picture, SNP ruling the roost, obviously in Scotland, but there you are, the blue of England. Switch to the projection in this poll in the Telegraph, Annabelle, your paper, and the Tories down to 53 seats.
It's just an extraordinary moment for the party. And just a few days ago, we were talking about the irony of the Conservatives going from an 80-seat majority down to 80 seats. And even that felt like an exaggeration. And yet here we are, the Tories potentially getting just 53 MPs. If the polls are to be believed, if people's stated preferences turn out to be their revealed preferences on the night, then, as I say, this is an extinction-level moment for the Conservatives. This is going to be reminiscent, not of 1906 here in the UK, I don't think, but more the Conservatives in Canada in 1993 when they were left with 2 seats, because you'll have a similar situation where they are going to have important strategic decisions to make over their future. And the party will be so split. It'll be split between the One Nation Tories and the Tories on the right of the party. And there's an analysis on the front
but, it depends who's left. I mean,
well,
never mind the Red Wall. It's goodbye East Anglia. I mean, it's really extraordinary.
Bye-bye Loopy Liz. There'll be no truss. I can't see any blue for Richmond. For Rishi Sunak. Wales, to me, I'm not quite sure the border, but it looks entirely Tory free. I'm one who believes in a fairer electoral system, one in which a party's national vote is roughly reflected by the number of MPs in the House of Commons. We don't have that. The Conservatives have benefited from it before. Labour looks like it's going to benefit massively from it this time. But it is the system, it's the rules of the game, we're playing it, and I think the Telegraph has done that wonderfully. You can have bar charts on the front of the eye, which I like, but you just draw a map like that and you see the change from blue to red, and you get how dramatic the change will be. It's I mean, look, it's a kind of
an absolutely seminal moment in British political history.
If the projections are accurate.
So we're talking about a Tory wipeout, but let's take a look at it from the Labour numbers. Labour, in this poll, forecast to have 516 seats and an estimated House of Commons majority of 382. And bearing in mind here, another number to throw at you, double that one by Sir Tony Blair back in 1997, which in itself was that seismic moment in British politics, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. I mean, Labour could potentially have 10 times the number of seats of the second largest party in British politics, approximately speaking. Again, Kevin.
Sorry. I know Keir Starmer promised change, but this is,
But I think what is, I think, worrying is that it doesn't feel reflective, that actually Starmer, Labour are polling on around 38%. How can that translate into 500 seats, a supermajority? And it speaks to the disillusionment that so many people feel in general with politics today. There's an expectation that the turnout might be quite low. It's still this close to the general election. There are a large number of undecideds. Of course, you've got that fractured vote on the right. The problem for the Tories is that, their core voters do feel this sense of disenchantment. They do want to exact some kind of revenge, punish the Tories. They may throw their support behind reform. That's a large part of this story. But how Keir Starmer will manage that. You know, is there a sweet spot actually for the Prime Minister in terms of the number of seats that he has? And Tony Blair managed a very large majority very well. I have my doubts that Keir Starmer will be able to control.
To be fair,
his
just quickly,
party in the
Ipsos,
same way.
you know, the poll that came out yesterday had 117 seats, which were, you know, effectively a small swing would make a big difference. So almost too close to call type seats. There may well be those as well.
But that's the nature of the electoral system. A small swing can just knock down so many when it doesn't really reflect the mood of the country. But I don't recall any complaints from the Conservatives in 2019 when on under 44% of the vote, they got way over 50% of the MPs. In fact, they needed fewer votes per MP than Labour did. But maybe it will ignite a debate on a more proportional electoral system. Maybe it will, but you have to win power in order to implement that. And if Keir Starmer, which he wasn't, was promising to bring in a new electoral system, he wouldn't be now when he's sitting on this mountain of bodies.
We had a vote with the coalition, didn't we? A vote on
2011,
AV,
a referendum.
Terrible turnout, I seem to remember. Is that
right? And it lost 2-1. But it was the additional member system, which I like.
Right.
The Lib Dems didn't, and the country rejected. But that's partly because they had enough of Nick Clegg.
Sometimes it's just too complicated for us.
The House of Commons in 1931 backed electoral reform, but then the Labour government fell. It hadn't got through the Lords.
I mean, ultimately, in a first-past-the-post system, if you cannot secure around 30% of the vote, then you are facing a wipeout. And when you consider that the headwinds facing the Tories aren't just their 14 years in power, aren't just the recent scandals and chaos, as Keir Starmer likes to say, but the fact that we have a political realignment that's been underway for the last decade or so, which means that voters are not divided along economic lines so much as they are cultural ones. It has meant that the Tories have been trying to unite these very different coalitions of voters. But in some ways, the Labour Party have as well, between the Liberal metropolitan elites and traditional red wall working.
The people running the Conservative Party now are weeping the whirlwind they created with Brexit. And that they kind of created a Frankenstein monster in Nigel Farage, who was an ally at that time of them, and he's now devouring them. In 2019, he pulled all his candidates, only stood against Labour, didn't stand against Conservatives, and helped Johnson get his majority. Now, he's all out just to smash the Conservative Party, get his revenge, and Labour is the winner. But there we are. It's all, you can trace it back to Brexit, this.
We're just going back to the eye, if we see that again, and talking about the extraordinary coalition that you're suggesting Boris Johnson pulled together, actually, in 2019. The paper up the top of this says 2028 looks increasingly attractive to Boris Johnson. So there we are. We'll wait and we'll watch this space. In the meantime, if we say small swings will have a massive impact on the scale of this wipeout so far predicted and projected, the Financial Times picking up on inflation, hitting the Bank of England's target for the first time in very nearly 3 years, I think it is, isn't it? But whether this will make any impact at all, the news they've been waiting for, we'll have to see.
I think it's extremely unlikely that it's going to have any impact, not least because the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee will meet tomorrow, and the expectation is that they will hold interest rates, partly for fear that they would look too political were they to cut them just a couple of weeks before a general election. Look, this is ultimately good news for the British economy. It's good news for people who've been suffering through the cost of living crisis. Interest rates will stay at 5.25%, but the fact that finally, after a 3-year rollercoaster, inflation is down to the 2%, Bank of England's 2% target is ultimately good news. And it should be good news for the Conservative Party. This is one of the 5 pledges that Rishi Sunak has been able to deliver on, but it's very unlikely that...
Rare sighting of the lesser spotted hunt. It's a very shy creature that hasn't been out very much. They've given an interview to the FT. They'll get no political dividend. They didn't take any blame for the soaring inflation, so you're not going to get any praise when it comes down. I mean, it's the way it is, isn't it? You didn't want the pain.
It seems to be with 2 weeks to go. Anyway, lots more. We haven't even touched the sides of the papers we want to talk about, so we've got lots to pack in the next half, including this in the Daily Mail, is nothing sacred to the eco-clowns. Their front page for tomorrow's papers.
They were doing everything right. They were on a lifeguarded beach, they both could swim, they weren't too deep, they were with people I'd never ever heard of a drowning in a rip current.
My son said that they were up to about their chest, and then he said just suddenly they couldn't touch the bottom.
Our two weren't weak children. Suna was tall. Joe was 6 foot tall, strong, muscly, and he got knocked off his feet and taken by the waves. There needs to be discussion about water safety as a whole.
It's a concerning statistic. I mean, there's a lot of contributing factors that could be leading to this rise in child drownings in particular. We've certainly seen probably more warm weather events, and we know that there is a link between those heat waves and instances of drowning. There's more people exploring open water through sports such as paddle boarding or going out and open water swimming in areas that they're not necessarily familiar with. And there's also, in all likelihood, a link between COVID lockdown and people not receiving those swimming lessons because of leisure centres being closed that they might have done in the past. We're in the middle of the Royal Life Saving Society's Drowning Prevention Week. And that's all about learning the water safety code in order to keep you and your family safe, really, around water. And that's about stopping and thinking, assessing the situation before you enter the water, immerse yourself slowly to protect against that cold water shock. It's about staying together, not to go out swimming by yourself, but to make sure that there's somebody with you in case somebody does get into trouble. Dial 999, so don't follow somebody in that you see in trouble, because actually that can exacerbate the problem and create more casualties. And then finally, float. And that's about getting onto your back in the starfish position, saving energy and awaiting rescue in the right way. The strapline of the Royal Life Saving Society is about enjoy water safely. So we don't want to put people off going into the water, whether that be at the coast or indeed inland. But certainly when there's youngsters involved, then we're conscious that issues can happen. Therefore, we'd encourage all parents to keep an eye on your children.
Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me, are Kevin Maguire and Annabel Denham. Welcome back to both of you. Let's go to The Guardian. Rachel Reeves promising to close the gender pay gap once and for all, make flexible working the norm, she says. Still don't know how this is achievable.
No, look, I want to be reasonably sympathetic towards Reeves because she will become the first female Chancellor of the Exchequer, and she will be an inspiration to young girls, and they will have somebody to look up to, a role model who has reached this very high office in British politics. Nonetheless, there are a lot of problems with the use of the term gender pay gap. So since 2017, companies with a headcount of over 250 have been forced to publish their gender pay gaps, but there are so many problems with the data, including the fact that you are comparing, for instance, EasyJet pilots with EasyJet cabin crew and then complaining that female cabin crew are being paid less than male pilots when, of course, they're not doing the same job, that I think it can lead people to draw the wrong conclusions. And what worries me is that companies may then be villainised and demonised, but also that we're feeding this sort of victimhood narrative that women are never going to be able to achieve as much as men.
Well, that's
specifically
because
on
of the
account
chunks
their
of time off
gender.
that women have to take.
Well, of course,
Because
we
of-
have a problem with the motherhood
That's
penalty
where I
as
think,
well.
I think that's where the gap really. Sorry,
No, that's absolutely fine.
if I may mansplain.
But between the ages of 22
I'll
and
just drink me
39,
water.
the gender pay gap, according to the annual survey of hours and earnings, is negligible between men and women. And actually, it's later in life that the gap
Because
starts
women then
to
are
emerge
often
because
carers
women
for
go
older
off
parents,
and
you see,
well,
as well, aren't they?
sandwich
But yeah.
generation.
But you can
So-
calculate the value of jobs, so it's equal value, and it's where, for instance, hospital porters would be paid more than people working in the canteen, because the porters tended to be men and those in the canteen tended to be women, but the jobs
I'd like
were
to
of
link
equal
that to
value.
Birmingham Council, but
Yeah,
yes.
so it's not saying a stewardess, a cabin crew doing the same jobs as
Well, they're
pilots,
too- I mean,
but
that's-
you can come up with the gaps. Are the disparities too great?
But that's equal pay for equal
yeah,
work,
but
which is a quasi-Marxist concept
yeah.
that I'm not personally in favour of.
I think, God, yeah, I love it.
That's separate to the
But I think
gender
that
pay gap.
14.3% gap she's identified is, you can't really defend that. We have to find a way of closing that.
Yeah.
Where I will slightly disagree
If
with
you
her,
could do it quickly.
she talks about being the last glass ceiling in politics. It is a glass ceiling, but I'd say there is one for class, economic class.
Yeah.
There is also one still on race, heritage. I'd say there's still one on disability. Maybe some other groups. So I think there are others. So she's right. There is a ceiling there, glass ceiling.
And I
But
note the
others
Times
exist
on the
too.
flexible working suggests working from home makes staff happier but not more productive. We'll talk about that
That's
later.
very good for Tory MPs who'll be spending a lot of time at home. Although they won't be working, will they?
Don't gloat. I
That's
haven't
all
got
right,
time
yeah.
to talk
Sorry.
about, but we will show the papers leading on Stonehenge, which has angered certainly the political leaders. The Mail and Express both leading on the Stonehenge pictures. Is nothing sacred to the eco-clowns. That is the verdict of the Daily Mail. Got to say thank you to both of you. There you go, just lock them up. That is the Daily Express as well. Big story two, lots to talk about tonight. Didn't pack everything we wanted to. Kevin Maguire and Annabel Denham, thank you very much indeed. Let's just have a quick look at the weather. It will be quite sunny into the weekend, and there's a chance of a heat wave developing next week. There'll be a mainly fine start tomorrow, although rather chilly out of town. Rather grey and damp, though, from the northwest of Ireland through to central Scotland. Expect the odd fog patch elsewhere, too. The morning will stay dry and sunny for most. Well, lots to talk about in Sky News at 11. Our press preview continues. Good and bad news for Rishi Sunak. Inflation down 2% rather, but a new poll suggesting a Tory wipeout and the lowest number of seats ever.